Well, welcome along to Off Script Extra Time. Myself, Chris McCarty, alongside my usual partner in crime, Robbie Greenfield. It is the day after the night before. Europe successful in the Ryder Cup, 17.5 points to 10.5 over their USA counterparts. The third biggest win of all time, Robert. A seventh success in the last 9 years. Give us your appraisal on it.
Well, I didn't see it coming. Put it that way. I predicted a big win for the Americans. I thought, looking at the strength of their team coming in, that they were going to finally reverse that run of what it dates all the way back to 1993, that they have not won on European soil. That was blown out of the water by quite simply just a tour de force performance from the European team. They got everything right, Chris. They gelled as a team. I think that goes without saying. The Europeans have always been good at that. They've always been good at being greater than the sum of their parts. The Americans have struggled. 2 years ago at Hazeltine, they seemed to get it right. They seemed to use that task force to good effect and actually click as a unit. But you saw some disconnect there with the American team. The Phil Mickelsons and the Tiger Woods, such a dreadful Ryder Cup record. They didn't gel as a team. They didn't work well with the rookies. The Europeans got it right. I think the course setup was key. I think the fact that it was a fiddly, quirky course that the Europeans know well from playing the French Open, that was important from a European perspective. It negated the strengths of the American team, which was the big hitting, bombing nature of the team. And bottom line, they hold more putts, Chris. Yeah. You know, that's the thing with Ryder Cups. You can recriminate all you like, you can point fingers, and the American media in particular is pointing a lot of fingers today. But the bottom line is that the Europeans hold the putts they needed to hold. And they ran away with it. 17.5, 10.5. It's a blowout.
You mentioned there the camaraderie between the Europeans, and I was interested to read that Rory McIlroy talking about this WhatsApp group, this loving amongst the players. How was that festered and how has that fostered itself in recent Ryder Cups? Because the USA, you said it yourself, a task force. They believed that they were on the path to success. The Europeans have just got it down pat. How? Why? Where has that started from?
It goes back to the fact they're a tour. Most of the European players play on the PGA Tour almost full time. So the fact that they also play on the European Tour, you know, gives them that camaraderie perhaps that has always traditionally been missing from the American players, who stick to themselves. They have their family around them, they have their team around them, but they go to a PGA Tour event, they keep themselves to themselves. The Europeans have dinner together, they travel together, they go to the Far East, they come here to the Middle East. They go all around the world playing golf together, and I think we saw an influx of players this year that were great additions from a camaraderie perspective. Jon Rahm didn't have the best Ryder Cup, but he's very well liked, he's very popular. Yeah. Tommy Fleetwood, you will not hear a bad word said about that guy on the European Tour. He's an immensely popular guy. He was such a hugely popular winner of the Race to Dubai last year, and you said it when you were sat on my sofa, this guy is just made for the Ryder Cup. And that's the case. You know, Tommy Fleetwood, he played brilliantly, scored 4 out of 5 points, 3 victories over Tiger Woods. It's something he'll remember for the rest of his life. Thomas Bjorn, hats off to him. He got the pairings right. He got a lot of criticism when he picked Sergio Garcia as a wild card. He went for experience. He said he was going to pick on form. He didn't necessarily do that. He picked the experience, given the fact that 5 rookies had made the team by right. And they delivered for him. You know, Henrik Stenson, Sergio Garcia, Paul Casey, Ian Poulter, they delivered in spades.
One man who you haven't mentioned there is Francesco Molinari, Open champion, the first Italian to win a major championship, of course winning over in Scotland at the back end of July, was it? The Open Championship?
That's right.
We saw him come through, the first European player to go 5-0. He was exemplary throughout the 3 days. Just a quick word on him as well.
He's just the dream Ryder Cup player because he hits the ball so straight. The guy is a metronome. We saw that at the Open Championship. He's added the ability to hold crucial putts to his game. For years, Francesco Molinari has been known as one of the tour de force ball strikers on the European Tour. Now he's holding a few putts. He's almost unstoppable in that Ryder Cup format. He'll win more majors, in my opinion, and those two dovetail beautifully. It was a course you needed to hit the fairway. We saw the Americans struggle to do that. They hit the ball a lot longer. Your Dustin Johnsons, your Brooks Koepkas, they're powerhouses. Yes, Rory McIlroy's a long hitter, but man for man, the Americans are more powerful. The fact was that course wasn't about hitting at 350 yards. It was about finding the fairway, giving yourself the best opportunity to hit iron shots into the greens and hold putts. It was a quirky course. The Americans don't know it so well. And I just feel, you can look at the American team and be disappointed in the fact that when you see the rankings, 6 out of the world's top 10, 11 out of the world's top 20, only player ranked outside the top 20 on that American team was Phil Mickelson, and he was 24th. He had a dreadful Ryder Cup, one to forget. But you look at the fact they don't play these European Tour courses. They're not familiar with them. The PGA Tour setups are very different. There isn't so much of a premium on hitting fairways, and the greens are a lot quicker. I think that's a big factor. The Europeans are used to slower greens. And these are all contributing factors to what we saw unfold in France.
You sat with Thomas Bjorn at an event here in Dubai earlier this year. You did a Q&A event with him. A quick word on Thomas Bjorn. Vindicated in his wildcard selections. You look at what Sergio Garcia brought to the table, Henrik Stenson, Paul Casey and Torbjörn Olesen, who arguably produced the performance of the day in those singles. Give us your appraisal of him, because Thomas Bjorn has come out of this with his reputation not just intact but hugely enhanced as well.
He certainly has, and I think with the doubts going into it, that the fact that he went with Sergio, it seemed like a cautious play. A lot of calls to pick Matt Wallace, the form horse. A lot of calls to pick our friend Rafa Cabrera Bello as well. He was also in great form and had a very legitimate claim to be on that team. He went with experience, and Sergio in particular just delivered for him. And you look at the fact that he put 4 rookies out in the morning, and actually Europe lost that session 3-1, and they were up against it. They came out in the afternoon and just blitzed the foursomes. 4-0. That set the ball rolling, and I think they had 9 unanswered points in the end. They were 9-3 up, having been 3-1 down, or 10-3 up, I beg your pardon. It was an amazing turnaround, and the winning captain will take all the plaudits. The losing captain will take all the negatives and all the questions in the aftermath. But let's listen to what Thomas had to say about this. And again, it's not about him. You'll hear from him now. It's more about the team performance.
This was a good group of guys, but I have to say, when we got here on Monday and we got together, this turned out pretty exciting, because the way the 12 of them have just joined up together as a team, and the way they looked after each other and been there for each other throughout the whole week made captaincy pretty easy. And the hardest thing about the captaincy, I think, this week was that there were so many guys playing well and being in such good a frame of mind that I didn't really, I wanted to get everybody on the golf course, and you can't. And today's performance, there was a little moment there in the middle of it all where I was getting a little bit worried, but then everybody stood up and did their bit, and I can't describe how I feel about these 12. They've been amazing from day one, and I'm just so proud of them.
Well, that is Thomas Bjorn's appraisal of his side's success. As we say, 17.5 points to 10.5, dominant from the Europeans. If we can transfer our look to the US, the recriminations will go far and wide. The US press, as you've already alluded to, Robbie, will have a field day on this. Where does the fault lie? Is it too easy to point the finger at Jim Furyk and his vice-captains? Do the players need to take a bit of responsibility as well?
I'd love to be sensationalist. I think that just as the European...
But you're not going to be, right?
I'm going to get myself firmly parked on that fence, Chris. Just as the Europeans' victory can be attributed to a number of factors, you've got a number of factors at play in why the Americans just didn't turn up. We mentioned the course. I never thought they took to it. Jim Furyk was asked whether more of them should have come over and played the French Open.
Yes.
All their schedules are mapped out in advance.
But on that though, Rob, that's a fair point that's been made by the press boys, because they should have. Is there not a semblance of them disrespecting the Ryder Cup by not factoring into their schedules a trip over to get a look at the course before the Ryder Cup kicks off? Or tees off, should I say?
It's easier to say it in hindsight, isn't it? It's one of those things. If America had won, no one would be asking that question. They've been beaten soundly, and now the question comes.
But on that though, when we talk about preparation, the US have given themselves an excuse. The questions rightly will be asked on that, because don't allow yourselves to have that issue. Get your players over, make sure you play the French Open, and then there is no excuse. So in that I guess standpoint, you can understand where the criticism comes from.
Golfers are free agents. They map their own schedules. They don't answer to Jim Furyk outside of the remit on the boundaries of the Ryder Cup. So Justin Thomas went over, he played it, and look how well he played as a result. That definitely had an impact. And this task force that is much maligned, that produced that victory for them at Hazeltine, I think they'll get together and that'll be one of the bullet points for discussion. Because I think it's fair to say, Chris, that America were big winners 2 years ago in Hazeltine. People easily forget that. 2012, they were set up to be big winners, and then the Europeans produced the miracle of Medina on the final day. But the Americans led 10-6 going into the final day in 2012. 2008, they won under Paul Azinger. So we're entering an era where the home team is the heavy favourite. And I discounted the Europeans this time around. I didn't think they would win. I thought the Americans were going to get it done. But I think what we're realising now, and a lot of the Americans, especially the American journalists, are coming in for a lot of flack. There was a columnist for Golf magazine. He wrote about the Ryder Cup becoming an irrelevance because the Americans were going to dominate so much. He said that we're now looking forward to decades of American dominance. Forget it, Europe. You're washed up. We've got it right now. And he's now got egg on his face as a result. He's had to apply. And then some of the European players picked him out in the press conference afterwards and made sure they gave him some extra bit of stick.
You've said there's a lot of contributing factors to the US's demise, if we can call it that. Jim Furyk, let's talk about the captain, because there was a couple of pairings that I know you and I fundamentally disagreed with. And it's easy to say in hindsight after they were beaten. Patrick Reed, Tiger Woods didn't look like a natural fit. And we saw on the final day, on the singles, Patrick Reed torn away from Tiger Woods, out of Tiger Woods' shadow. He goes and beats Tyrrell Hatton 3-2. Gave the little hush sign as well to the European fans. Bryson DeChambeau, huge sympathy for him. Given Tiger Woods, given Phil Mickelson on day one, given Tiger Woods on day two as well in the foursomes. Pairings, again, hindsight's a wonderful thing, but a lot of them didn't add up to me.
The weirdest stat in golf, Tiger Woods and Phil Mickelson are 1-7 on Ryder Cup teams. They've played in 8 together.
Wow.
They've won 1 in 1999. And that required a miraculous comeback at Brookline from 10-6 down. So there is something about the Ryder Cup and those two that just does not mix. It's like oil and water. It really is. Tiger Woods had won the Tour Championship the week before. He'd returned to glory in the most spectacular fashion. I'm sure fatigue was there. He's 42. He's had a spinal fusion. He's had 4 back operations. He probably wasn't feeling tip-top, in all fairness. But Phil Mickelson only has himself to blame. Phil Mickelson, and I know you're not his biggest fan, you're not his biggest admirer, and you've probably had an issue, and rightly so, of some of the ways he's gone about restructuring the Ryder Cup. He just didn't show up. He was reduced to the role of a cheerleader. Bryson DeChambeau and him were thrashed in the foursomes. Why he was put out in the foursomes as the most crooked driver in the entire Ryder Cup team, on both sides, I'll never know. He could have at least played the 4 balls where he's got an opponent who he doesn't have to do alternate shot with. He's got a teammate, sorry. So those two didn't turn up. And that's a significant portion of the American team. They're legends in the game, and the young guys look up to them. The dynamic was so different when Tiger wasn't in the team 2 years ago. And, well, let's hear from Tiger now, Chris, because 0 from 4, he was very disconsolate afterwards. He had this to say.
Well, we obviously didn't win the cup. We didn't execute like we had planned and wanted to. For me personally, I went 0-4, and obviously very disappointing because those are the 4 points that aren't going towards our side, it's going towards their side. And to have a Ryder Cup in that way, for me personally, it doesn't feel very good because I didn't help my teammates earn any points. And at the end of the day, we came here as a team and we win or lose, and unfortunately we lost this one.
That is the thought there of Tiger Woods then, as you can hear there, bitterly disappointed with his own performance. You said it yourself, I think he's played 7 of the last 9 weeks. Fatigue, 42 years of age now, he's been through the rigmarole of all those injuries, Rob. And just summing up though, Ryder Cup 2018, a huge success for Europe, I think a huge success for golf as well. France proved themselves to be a perfect host. The Le Golf National proved to be a beautiful golf course as well that really tested the golfers. It rewarded good golf as well. Your overall summarisation of what we witnessed?
Yeah, we said it watching, what was it, a good 20 hours of it on the coverage over the weekend, and I didn't leave my apartment for 56 hours straight, which is a record, but it's a brilliant sporting event, and it's getting bigger and bigger and better. You'd like to have been a little closer come the end. There was a moment in the singles where it just looked like the Americans might produce something, but that fizzled out very quickly. I think anticlimactic ultimately, a big win for the Europeans, a brilliant event. Hats off to France, because I think a lot of people thought, as a non-golf loving nation, they might not, produce the kind of Ryder Cup that we've seen either in the UK, Spain, or in the US, but they did. The course was perfect. It was brilliantly set up. And the narrative going into Whistling Straits in 2 years' time, where, I'm going to say it again, the Americans will be big favourites over on their home patch in 2 years' time with the young guns that they've got. They will be favourites to reclaim it, but it's a brilliant narrative. The Americans winning in Hazeltine, the Europeans claiming it back. They've got the spoils for now, but roll on 2020 and the Ryder Cup in Whistling Straits, Chris.
Absolutely. What a fantastic Ryder Cup it was. Success for Europe then. Robbie Greenfield, big thank you to you. Big thank you to you guys for tuning in as well. That has been the 2018 Ryder Cup. Cannot wait for 2020 to tick around.
Stay one step ahead with Dubai Eye.